come on over. Come on down. Thomas, you're over here. In other words, right where you were. As you were. Okay, welcome. So I'm going to do a breakout here for people who've had class before and looking for insight into assessments, Ayurvedic assessment, but the specific flavor of assessment that I'm going to talk about is called Radionics. 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 Okay? So radionics is based on this principle that all things resonate at frequencies unique to the things. Boy, that's pretty simple, I think. Pretty straightforward. All things resonate with a frequency that is specific to the thing. And we start with the most basic frequencies. So one you might call the sound of creation. In Ayurveda, that is described as the Om sound. So what is the Om sound? What is Om? Okay, other than something that the yogi wannabes think will make them more spiritual if they hum it. It actually represents a specific frequency, which is found everywhere. So, for example, modern astronomers, radio astronomers, have pointed their telescopes in 360 degrees around the planet, out into space, out into the solar system, and everywhere that they pointed the antennas, and these are antennas they're using are radio telescopes, so they receive radio signals. Remember, radio is sound, okay? Everywhere that they have pointed their telescopes, when they fine-tune out the background noise, the local noise, the background noise, local broadcast, radio, television, all that, there is a tone, a humming tone, which is now comes up on the radio, and it's consistent. It's always the same frequency, and it's in every direction that you can point a radio telescope on the planet Earth. So now when they're doing things with these radio telescopes like SETI and others, looking for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence, they actually have to filter this sound out because it's background noise. It's not white noise. Static. It's not static. It's an actual tone. And it happens to resonate at the same tone that is the preferred tone for Om, for doing Oms, and for reciting Oms. Okay? And so it is colloquially referred to as the sound of creation. Because we can actually project a telescope out into space, and we can compute mathematically how far back in time we're looking at. That the origin of this sound is coming from the past. And no matter how far the telescope looks, there are these artifacts. And this mother tone, this bass tone is there no matter how far back the telescopes look. And so we think that's, we don't know, right? But it's referred to as the sound of creation. And that creation occurred. Now, whether you're evolutionist or Darwinist or creationist, who cares? Either way, there's a point in time where there was nothing and then there was something, and here we are. However you get here, there's a point where there was nothing and then there was something, and here we are. And everybody's arguing over it right now. All the finest and the smartest and the brightest and luminaries of the luminaries. This is not settled. But the idea is that it was such a momentous occasion that the echo of that creation is still with us. It's still ringing the bell. The bell never stopped ringing. Okay? So even creation has a resonance. Creation has a frequency. And philosophers throughout history have actually tried, like they projected that this existed long before radio telegraphers, telescopers, astronomers actually recorded a sound, which is now claimed to be the sound, that thousands of years ago, sadhus and sages and priests said they could hear this. They could hear it. Who knows? Maybe it was even easier to hear in the past, less interference by other sources of telemetry and sound and vibration and frequency and radio and television and and all that. It's just like we say, we broadcast a television station. It goes into space and it will be infinitely traveling through space. So hypothetically, if you were on Andromeda or Alpha Centauri and you had the antenna tuned to television frequency pointed in the right direction, you could still watch I Love Lucy in real time. What's a two-way street? It's a two-way street. All right, now that's the macro. The micro is everything has its own frequency and resonance. In Ayurveda, frequency and resonance starts with the principle of Prakriti and Purusha. Purusha and Prakriti. Male and female, the origin of divine male and female principle, which is separate and distinct from ahimsa, or the universal origin of all things. There's a differentiation, and what makes male male and female female as constituents of creation is their frequency. And one is considered concentric and one is considered eccentric. And all the eccentric frequencies are male and all the concentric frequencies are female. And then they, through this process of mingling with consciousness or ahimsa, they become the 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. And the 5 elements are constructs of the interaction of that first primordial triad, which creates a harmonic interaction. And so the 5 elements are describing a harmonic interaction of those first 3 primordial forces. And in traditional Christian theology, well, that's God the Father, Holy Spirit, and Jesus. Okay? That first primordial Trinity, which is, and Holy Spirit is the feminine, Jesus is the masculine, or reconciling between God the Father is masculine and Jesus, who's the reconciler, the peacemaker, the one who brings heaven and earth together, who brings all the disparate energies of the primordial Trinity together in human form. Okay? In Ayurveda, before we get to human form, we go to elements. We have the 5 elements, and each one of them is considered more or less dense in relation to frequency than the others. So ether is considered to be the least dense. The least dense is also the higher percentage by volume. So earth is not the highest percentage of matter in the universe, which is the accretion of those 3 primordial frequencies, the harmonic, the first harmonic. No, ether is the first harmonic. Space is the second harmonic. We see ether as the tableau, the milieu of creation. Okay, space is the frequency that allows concretization of manifestation. the coming out of pure energy into materiality of creation with substance enough that it's differentiated from the background of creation, the ether, and has this primary characteristic of movement. It can move. In the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about the word moving over the face of the deep. Okay? So that which moves in the ether in Ayurveda is space. All right? Now, when something moves in space, it interacts with the space it moves in. In other words, space interacts with ether and produces thermal energy as one of its primary constituents, which is the frequency of energy that we say is light and hot. And so that becomes fire. That's the genesis of fire. And then fire interacting with space and ether is adapted by them, is changed by them, is altered by them, and it creates another level of harmonics, which we call condensation, or water, or the wet. So the water. So just like in the Genesis story of the creation of the earth, before there was land, there was water. Okay? And then the water further interacts with what the primary frequencies that are the milieu that it exists in, and concretizes into solidity, that which is solid. Now, that which is solid begins its life in the carbon molecule, hydrogen and carbon. All physical matter is composed of carbon. All crystals are carbon. All rocks are carbon. All dirt is carbon. Do you understand? And so, where does carbon come from? Combustion. Something combusts, and the smoke, and it smokes. That smoke is a manifestation of this becoming that, and the transition between the log and the air is smoke, and that smoke is a production of or release of the latency of carbon that's in the wood. I'm just saying, this is the picture formula, okay? Becomes material, and then that material further bumping into each other with everything that came before in an environment that is conscious. See, over all this ether, space, fire, water, earth, what is driving them to interact is not chaotic, and it's not happenstance, it's not accidental, not in Ayurveda, not in Christianity. What drives the materiality, both ephemeral and temporal, in the world to interact with each other is consciousness. First, God consciousness, the consciousness of God. In Ayurveda, it's described as the undifferentiated cosmic consciousness, as the old Maharishi Mahesh Yoga used to describe it. And of course, in the Bible, in Genesis, it is the Logos, which is the Word, which is also the mind of God. Okay? So consciousness is what drives manifestation. And so we have the creative elements of manifestation. And so out of the aggregate of those 5 elements, we then have the various expression, the further harmonization, the harmonics. So we have primary notes interacting, creating secondary harmonics, creating tertiary, quaternary, infinity of harmonics. And each order of magnitude we also refer to as a step in the ray of creation. We have different ways of describing it. And there's many, many attempts in many cultures and traditions trying to describe essentially the same thing. And I don't get hung up on the words, because in India they call it Tanmatra, or they call it Guna, or they call it Mahabhuta, or well, I don't care. Over here I call it God the Father, Holy Spirit, Jesus, and the Word. You know, and then we get the Garden of Eden, which is the optimum environment with the most coalescing of the disparate harmonics. So all the things that are in the Garden of Eden represent a signature of frequency. And as they all come together in the same place at the right time, driven by consciousness, then there is Adam, or the Adam, humans. Okay? Humans with faculties, which are sensual. Why? Because they're made of the 5 elements. And the first element that humans are made of is described as earth. Adam's made from clay. Adam's a dirt bag. He's the original dirt bag. He's made from dirt, but imbued with life and consciousness, and with faculties. So Adam comes into the picture with faculties, and just like Ayurveda says, we come in with the 3 qualities of Rajas, Sattvas, and Tamas, which have to do with the mental faculties, which have to do with the sensual faculties, which have to do with the physical faculties. We have all of them. We come fully equipped with all of them, just like Adam comes with all of these faculties, well enough that he can just get up and start chilling with God. Just like in Ayurveda, in the Hindu part of Ayurveda, in the first created humans, okay, from the very beginning, they're able to converse with, deal with, and interact with the gods, both good news and bad news. Right from the beginning. There's no evolution of humans to get to a point where they can actually communicate and even argue with their creators. I find that very interesting. That's a same but different. Okay? Now back to frequency. So every step along the way is signified by a resonance or a frequency. And so maybe that's what God consciousness is. That's what being spiritual is. That's what truly being in the likeness of a higher being or power is resonating with the frequency of that which is a higher frequency. In other words, the sub-harmonics being less sub and more in the field of the higher levels of harmonics. And there's actually an engineering concept that relates to this, which has to do with this phenomenon that lower frequencies will change their frequency and will begin to resonate with a higher frequency based on proximity and density. So literally, a tuning fork will change its tune if it's next to another tuning fork that has a denser, higher frequency. So you can actually take, tuning forks are set. You know what they are. They're set to a tone, A, B, C tone. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si with the half tones, 2 half tones. Okay? The musical scale. So you can actually change the resonance of a tuning fork. And that is a thing in physics. It's a thing in electrical engineering. It's used in industry. Certainly it's used in music. Certainly it's used in music. So if everything has a resonance frequency, At this level of manifestation on the ray of creation, let me put my map in the sand, my flag in the sand on the map, and my star on the universal map of creation, and say, I am here now. X marks the spot. This is where I'm at. This is right here, right now, is where my consciousness and my materiality, which is an aggregate of the sum of all the independent frequencies that construct me, that give me shape and form and substance and consciousness, is right here on the map right now. That is a level of creation, and it has a resonant frequency, plus or minus. Plus or minus. And in this particular illustration, all of my frequencies that are readily accessible to me, we call resonant frequencies of the earth. Give or take, a little bit above and a little bit below. Okay? So to some degree, I'm in harmony with everything else that's in the world with me right now. Now, because I'm in harmony of it, most of the frequencies that are around me are invisible. But just because I can't sense them or feel them or discern them with the five senses doesn't mean that all these frequencies are not around me. Frequencies from the lights, frequencies from the floor, frequencies from outside, frequencies from the rain, frequencies from the wind, frequencies from the sunlight. They don't go away just because I don't feel them, or I'm not aware of them, or I'm not sensitive to them. They're all here, and they're all part of my some resonance. Historically, smart people, don't use terms, physicians, philosophers, doctors, rishis, yogis, priests, devotees, whatever, have been trying to separate the white noise and to be able to, on purpose, focus on, isolate, and read particular frequencies. And they have been practicing for all of human history, both within themselves, using self-editing technologies, which we call meditation, as just a global prayer and meditation, thoughtful sitting, however you want to reach it. So these are the things that I can do. But as long as people have been doing the thoughtful sitting, they've also been looking for other tools to amplify their senses. And not just the physical senses, but amplify their intuitive senses, amplify their innate senses, because we believe there is such a thing, right? Amplify communication internally to parts of us that have a greater sensitivity to the environment. Let me give an illustration in concrete terms. We use this term glibly, immune system. Okay? It is endlessly fascinating to me to read about research into the functioning of the immune system. And I've learned a lot over the years. I've gotten a lot of really interesting hits, and I've gained a lot of information. It's a deep well, and by the way, it is worthwhile to occasionally throw your bucket in that deep well of what is the immune system, how does it work, why does it work. Some of the little tidbits of trivia that come out of this research are that your immune system in your body right now has a recording, a memory of every virus you've ever been exposed to from in utero in the womb to the current moment. Now, how many viruses are there in the world that you could have been exposed to? Nobody knows. It's kind of infinite. All right? It has a record of every bacteria that you've ever been exposed to in your life, both ones that you didn't know, no symptoms, and those that caused you to have symptoms and or infections. It has a record of every infection that you've ever had in your entire life, from in uterus of your mom to the present day. In real time, it has that information. in real time, it has a recording of every stressor, positive and negative, that you've ever been exposed to in your whole life, from in utero to the present moment. And it can recall that information virtually instantaneously. So in other words, the recall, and how do we know it recalls the information? Because if it's re-exposed to that vector of virus, bacteria, trauma, or whatever, it begins to change and adapt the endocrine system fast as the speed of light. So for all intents and purposes, that information is right here in real time accessible. And it's almost an infinite amount of information. And it's accessible in real time. But now 99.999% of that immune memory, cataloging, response, directive for production of immune factors appropriate for the vector is completely unseen, unknown to us. 99, and I want to say more than that, 99.999, it's just not. You only notice the immune system working in the most extreme situations of health. And you don't see it at all when there's no extreme situation. But it's active all day, morning to night, doing one thing in the morning, another thing at lunch, another thing after lunch, another thing at dinner, another thing late, another thing while you're sleeping. It's active, and it's doing very complex processes 24/7 every day that you're alive in the world. But sub-threshold. Now, okay, that's a big system. If you think about it, it's Doctor Who's phone booth. Okay? What I mean by that is it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Because it has to exist in real time in multiple dimensions. And in order for those processes to occur the way that we think they occur now, right? The bulk of those processes, even the memory function, has to occur in another dimension. Some people try to name these other dimensions, and they'll call it, well, it's in the Akashic record. And they'll say that there's an envelope of energy frequency, a resonance that surrounds the earth that acts as a storage medium for everything that's ever happened on the earth, which includes all of your personal happenings. Includes every thought that's ever been thought by a human being. So this is how some people describe this field of influence, which sometimes some people call the Akashic field. I don't know if it's the Akashic field or not. What do I know? I'm just brainstorming here. I'm just making stuff up as I go. Okay? But regardless of what you call it, it's a thing. It's a thing. Regardless of what you call it. Regardless of whether you say that thing is on the outside, around the planet, or it's on the inside, but in a body that is multidimensional, simultaneously existing in multiple planes and dimensions in the same framework, part of what we call the matrix body. So, ancients wanted to communicate with the innate, because they came to the logical conclusion by condensed thinkery, condensation of thinkery, came to the most logical conclusion that they could, that there was a part of us that we are not consciously aware of that is operating our show in the physical realm and protecting us and connecting us to the actual living environment that we're part of. And you could call that the innate. Okay? The innate. So this idea of radionics, this idea of dowsing, however you do it, whether you do it with an instrument whether you do it with a willow branch, willow branch, shaped like a wishbone, or man-made wishbone, or dowsing rods, pendulums, just an ordinary stick, like you just pick up a stick out in the yard and break it so it's only about this long and about this wide, and how you can find the balance point on that stick, and you can walk around the yard and ask questions and the stick will react. And it'll tip forward or back, and in some cases it will turn in your hand if you don't hold it tight. It's well documented. Okay? You can do that. You can do that as an experiment if you want. You want to find where the ley lines are on the property, you can do that. You can take a stick. You can, if you have a little branch like a Y, that seems to be more sensitive because antenna's shape matters. The shape of an antenna. Why? Because the shape of the antenna isolates particular frequencies more than others. Okay? So that's why you prefer one instrument or another. And as long as there have been people trying to craft instruments that would give them the ability to communicate in real time with their innate. And if that innate is also connected to greater powers, which of course we believe they are, because remember, the innate is a servant of a greater power of consciousness, God if you will, to find instruments and to use instruments to be able to be, quote unquote, not only closer to God, but I mean like the radio microphone receiver to talk to God with an expectation of hearing an answer. And not necessarily in words, but in something definable and unique way that is actually repeatable. And so then we have more and more tools. And then we have not only the tools for discernment to communicate, ask questions from the innate. As for me, I don't know your innate, but my innate resonates with yours if we're anywhere in proximity. And in Ayurveda, classical Ayurveda, there's actually a distance that's optimal for that resonance, and it's about 50 feet. So if you're closer to another person than this distance of approximately 50 feet, okay, you can actually discern their energy, and you will react to them and they will react to you. Okay? Even Napoleon Hill said thoughts have wings, because he talks about in Think and Grow Rich this phenomenon of being walking into a party or being in a party, and you're just hanging out in the party, chatting with your friends, or being social or whatnot, and all of a sudden the hair stands up on the back of your neck, and there's 50 people in this party, and you turn around and look behind you, and there's someone all the way on the other side of the house or building staring at you. And when you turn around, you look right at them, you know they're looking at you. And he talked about, this is a well-known phenomenon, okay? So he said, well, how's that possible? What is the medium of communication? And then they have all these thoughts have wings. Talk about, projecting of thought, which again, what is a thought? It's a frequency, okay? And I don't care chicken or egg right now. I'm not saying what's the frequency that generates the thought, and I'm not talking about how thoughts are frequency or you can create frequency with thoughts. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about that my innate, if we're in a space, is already to some degree resonating with your innate. And if I can tune myself more to that level of frequencies, and then I'll use an amplifier to take me a little further than what I'm naturally inclined to do, to show me things that ordinarily I would miss with my eyes or my ears or my nose or my hands or my conversation, or my physicality of response, which is hormonal, okay, that I would miss. And even to the point of asking specific questions about myself or about my clients or other people. And then what we say is, use your powers for good. So if I can tune into your innate and ask a question and get a response, whatever I get, I'm honor bound to only use it for good. Because insight can be used for good or bad. It's not good or bad. And a lot of bad people have high levels of instinctive ability to discern innate feelings and activities, and even to the point of almost being like mind readery. And they're bad people, and they'll use it against you. Okay? So we all have this ability, but we can enhance it. But if we do, and we get a result, we have to use that result for a good thing. And then what that does, though, it's really cool, because it teaches our innate how to function ethically, which actually generates more power for our use and access of our innate. If we are douchebags, we may misread people. We may read them accurately, we may not read them accurately. All you got to do is look on YouTube any given day and see stupid criminals who made stupid decisions with the wrong people. And if they've been paying just a little bit more attention and had listened to just a little bit more of the inner red flags kind of situation, they wouldn't have done what they did, and they wouldn't have had the consequence that they had, which was because they were just not reading the situation correctly. Right? So in medicine, also in spiritual and philosophical pursuits, we want to read the room correctly, or more correctly, because it's still judgment what I do with it. Okay? And if I'm going to help you, and I know there's inner outer secret in every illness, there's the outer, which you know and everybody else can see across the street, down the road, on the opposite side of the road. I can tell if you're in distress, if you're falling down and passing out, and I see that a block away. You know you're uncomfortable, and I can see it a block away. So that's outer. And then there's inner, that's the disability, or it doesn't have to be negative, but positive or negative, that I can't see unless I investigate you, that's assess, or you tell me. You're aware of it, but I'm not aware of it unless I assess you and or you tell me. And then secret, which is the elements of imbalance that the client cannot see or feel, doesn't understand, correlations they don't make, and which are not obvious to the practitioner and can only be found with very subtle assessment, which can either be a radionic assessment or can be an electronic assessment, which could be a blood test. See, that's a very that is a not common level of observation, because I need a microscope, or I need to put it on a slide and see if I can show a sign of anemia, because you don't have to put a blood drop on a slide to see if the blood is anemic. All you have to do is put it on a white card and let it dry for a few minutes, and then compare the drying blood to a colored index, and it will tell you if the blood is good or if the blood's anemic. It's real simple. Don't need a microscope. But can I do that just by looking at it? Well, if I do enough anemia samples, I'll know the color spectrum of anemic blood, and I can be able to see a drop of your blood and make a guess whether you're anemic or not, an educated guess. But if I'm going to talk about mosaic or scaling or tiling or sickle cell, blood cell activity, well, I can only do that with a microscope. If I'm going to talk about capillary diffusion, I can only do that with a microscope. Do you understand? And so the radionic assessment is the microscope for frequency. It's the microscope for energy. And then all the devices like Dr. Copeland, Dr. Tinsley, and others that they created were amplifiers first and foremost. Hieronymus machines, Hieronymus schematics, which I put one in your book. It's in the back of the book. Hieronymus schematics, they're amplifiers. They have an antenna which can receive a signal. There's an amplification circuit, and then there is a transmitter, and then there's a receiver. So everything that's in a radio or a crystal radio is in a Hieronymus radionic circuit. And all radionics machines use this schematic. Now they may elaborate on it. So they may have a series of diodes to amplify certain frequencies. They may have transistors to amplify frequencies. They may have resistors to tune, to remove white noise. They may have actual powered amplifiers to pick up signals that are below audible, even into audible ranges. They may have light-based rectifiers, which could be as simple as a crystal in the circuit, like a jade machine, okay? Or could actually be a laser in the radionic device, which then goes through a series of mirrors in the device to create a holographic projection of the frequency. So now we're using a photonic manifestation of the frequency to enhance the overall sensitivity of the apparatus. Anyways, but it could be as simple as a stone. It could be as simple as a twig from a branch from a bush or tree shaped like a wishbone or in a Y shape. It could be as simple as a straight stick that you pick up off the ground. But then, of course, we've been doing this a long time. And so over time, we found that humanity who's interested in this subject, okay, that some things work better than others. Yes, you can take someone's pulse and you can get a really good idea of the dosha that's in balance. Okay? But you got to take the pulse to do it. Yes, you can look at a person and get a really good idea of their prakruti and their vikruti, of their seated dosha and the imbalance dosha, and even with a little more looky-loo and even questions about their lifestyle preference, sleep, don't sleep, food they like, hot, sour, bitter, sweet, versus, whether they're hot or cold, or whether they're oily or dry, or whether they're whatever. To get this indication of dosha imbalance, chakra imbalance, elemental imbalance. And I don't care if it's Ayurvedic elements or Chinese elements or Greek elements, Unani elements. I don't care. It's the same scheme. Different ways of saying the same thing. Okay? You can do that, and I recommend that you practice that. Always. Practice your observations that are in the theory book, the one with the bamboo cover. Go to the how to see if a person has a vata imbalance. Look at how to see if someone has a pitta imbalance or a kapha imbalance. How to know if someone has an elemental imbalance. Memorize the charts. That's how you do it. You memorize the charts. Okay? However, once you've done that, if you're still not clear, then, and also I want to say not in every case. Sometimes I go to radionic as kind of a shorthand, quick, I want an assessment really quick. I got a ballpark just by looking at you, and you told me what your complaint is. But also, I want to just get to the treatment. What's the treatment emphasis that this person in front of me needs today? And then that's one of the ways that I use it. So we can use it as an assessment tool, but just like on the back here, we can also use it to make medicine and tune that medicine for the specific person we're giving it to you. So for example, if I'm just going to give you a vitamin C, recommend that you take a vitamin C, and I have your vitamin C with me, okay? I can take this schematic and I can tune it to your frequency and the outcome that I want you to have from taking the vitamin C. And I can tune that stranger's vitamin C, which came on an airplane, which came on UPS, which was in a health food store, and was imprinted by 100 people's energy and frequency of environment. It was radiated by X-rays on the plane. It was radiated by X-rays when it went through customs. It was in a hot truck, a hot UPS truck, tractor trailer first, and then delivery truck, warehouse, delivery truck, unair conditioned warehouse, and finally gets to you, and I can take it and I can revitalize it and at the same time tune it to be in harmony with your particular resonating frequency. Now in Rife technology, okay, Rife had a beautiful term for this. He called it MOR. M-O-R. And most radionic people have been using this from then to now. Okay? And MOR stands for mortal oscillatory rate. Mortal oscillatory rate. And guess what? So you're mortal. So what it means is it's all of the sum of your personal frequencies and harmonics. Many of them which you have carried from the past to the present time, not just where you're at now, stored in the tissue. Things that are stored, like scar tissue causes dissonance. So scar tissue is in fascia. Fascia has a constant flow of energy, which is actually closer to the light spectrum of energy. And when you have an injury to the fascia and you have scar tissue, it causes a dissonance right there. It's like an orchestra that has a horn section and one of those horns is out of tune. They start the symphony, the horn was in tune. But for some reason, the trumpet player, he hiccuped and he dropped his trumpet and it tweaked the bell on his trumpet. So even if he's Marsalis, Wynton Marsalis, when he picks that trumpet back up and goes to play, it's out of tune. And it will cause a dissonance in the whole orchestra. Okay? So scar tissue will do that. An old negative emotional issue which has not been resolved will do that. Some people call these emotional evidence of negative energy engrams, but that's a word, okay? But the concept of what an engram is not contained within one group or organization's definition because it pre-existed the organization. This idea of imprinting negative energies and even karmic energies and even past life energies and so on, that they're actually still causing dissonance and causing complications in your health and your mind and your spirit and your soul right now, this minute, in real time. So I can use a schematic like this to make a medicine that's perfect for you. That's not right for anybody else in the world. That's your medicine. So this is a Hieronymus schematic. Okay? And there are people who have spent $1 million building devices based on this schematic, high tech. And then having them manufactured and distributing them and so on and so forth. But now, on the flip side of that page, we have another part of the making the medicine appropriate for the client. Okay, we have this chart. Here, I'll hold it up so we can see it. And this, again, is a Hieronymus circuit. It's a basic radionic circuit. And you will find this circuit, by the way, carved in the walls of ancient temples. And people look at these things and they don't know what they're looking at. And they may look like this. They may be elaborate. They may just be a circle, two circles and a line. Okay? Instead of this and this, you could have a symbol of an animal, one kind of animal here and one kind of animal here. You could have a symbol of one kind of a pagan god or old god or Greek god and another one over here. One is the giver and one is the receiver. And in the sacred temple, in the Egyptian pharaonic medical tradition, they would make medicines through a sacred process that they consider to be profound energy signatures. The medicine itself is an energy signature, or an object is an energy signature, like carved representation of platonic solids, for example, tetrahedron, square, cube, pyramid, globe. You understand? Five platonic solids. Okay? So this object has mana, as the Hawaiians say. It has sacred energy in the object. Okay? So I put that over here on the copy. Okay? And then I do like Ken does all the time. He's always making medicine. How do I know he's always making medicine? Is next time, he won't do it again today because I'm bringing attention to it, but tomorrow or the next day, count how many times he says, copy that. Because you have the source material, and what do? You copy it. You replicate it. This is called path of simulacrum, a simile. That's what this arrow is. And then over here, I put the receiver, which could be another object, which could be a vessel container of water, because water is really good at catching frequencies and catching energy and quote unquote catching vibes. But guess what could be over here? Crystal. Crystal could be over here. A container of aromatherapy could be over there. A Galivardan magnetic resonance radionic card for arnica could be over here. I could infuse whatever is over here will receive the imprint frequencies of whatever's over here. I could build a temple complex with one building over here, a causeway, and one building over there, like the Temple of Karnak in Egypt. And I can do one thing in one part of the temple, and I can actually treat, infuse, or change the energy of what's something else in another part of the temple. And that could be people. That could be things. That could be food. Do you understand? So when we look at these old temples and we say, wow, we don't know what they were thinking. We don't know. We don't know. You start to study these principles and you look around you and you go to Mexico City and you go just outside of Mexico City to the ancient city where you have two pyramids and a causeway. And if you're coming from Mexico City and you're facing this pyramidal structure, which is called Teotihuacan. I've been there. Okay, I've climbed these pyramids. I've walked that causeway. Teotihuacan. Okay, on your left is the Pyramid of the Sun. Causeway called the Jaguar Way, or the Way of the Jaguar. And then on the right side, Pyramid of the Moon. And between them, on both sides of the causeway, is a series of excavated minor temples. and structures. They have different names and different functions. But you get the picture, right? You got the big pyramid of the sun on this end, which is huge, humongous. One of the biggest pyramids in the world, okay? And then on the other end, you have the pyramid of the moon, which is a finely structured, classic step pyramid also. And then you have this stone-lined, granite-lined, monolithic stone-lined causeway between the two pyramids. And those stones, we know, have ionic and electrical properties. We know that for a fact. Okay. So you go to the Pyramid of the Sun and you do ceremony. You expect the energy from that ceremony to create a tuning effect on what's happening on the Pyramid of the Moon in real time. Now, where did I hear that first? Not when I was at Teotihuacan. We were just ignorant tourists. Okay? From Acacio Agatahela, who was a former chief and medicine man of the Tarahumara clan of the Huichol Nation in Sierra Madre, Chihuahua, Mexico. There's a picture of him on my refrigerator with the group of Huichols that came to my house and stayed with me for a week. A group of Huichol chiefs, men and women, came from Chihuahua, Mexico to my house and lived with me for a week. And we did ceremony every day and we had long conversations. And we did sweats. And I built the first sweat for them, and then they ran a sweat for me. And then I ran the next sweat, and then they ran a sweat for me. We alternated being medicine men, where I would lead a sweat for them and sing to them, and then they would lead a sweat for me and sing to me. And we did ceremony, we did peyote, we did water, we did fried chicken. We did the traditional Huichol fried chicken because they discovered that they were permanently and irrevocably addicted to Kentucky Fried Chicken while they were at my house. As in, like God had come down from the clouds with a silver platter with KFC on it to give them. They literally said that this is the most sacred, beautiful, tasty food we have ever had in our whole life. KFC. See, that's not PC, is it? I'm probably not even supposed to tell the story. Okay?
But it's true.
But they told me the whole complex of Teotihuacan, which of course Acacio says was built by the Aztecs, because that's who the Huichols are. They're the descendants, the living descendants of the Aztecs. The Aztecs never went away. They're still here. We just now call them Huichol Tarahumara, Zapotec. You know, that's what we call them now, okay? And he said that the whole entire temple complex was a resonating device to call down the powers of heaven and then to transverse them into materiality. He used the term magic, okay? Godly magic. But this is the higher technology that we call magic. You know, it's the technology of the higher powers that on our level seems to be magic. Okay? And so this could be a map of Teotihuacan right here. Do you see this? So it's like you have to ask yourself, well, where did Hieronymus get this idea? But if you look at this, this could be the Temple of Karnak. This could be Teotihuacan. This could be Chichen Itza and the Boulevard. This could be, I could name right now off the top of my head, I could name 2 sacred ceremonial sites and pyramid sites and so on and so forth that actually follow this pattern to some degree or another. And remember, there are bells and whistles because I can get complex. I can add rectifying chambers. I can add chambers in this path that amplify certain frequencies and depress others. See? That's where we get into schematics. Right? You with me so far?
Always find joy in the smallest of things. That is what we found in you. Oh, 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 you are joy. Never give up when the going gets rough. Hope is everything you need. Oh, 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 you are hope. Oh, 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 you are hope. And don't forget you're not alone. The Holy Spirit wants to guide you.